Hello and welcome to the third video in our OBS Utils tutorial series. Today we are going to be looking at the remote interaction capabilities of the module that allow you to interact with OBS directly from the game. The first setting we're going to be going over is, ironically, the second setting in the menu, as well as this little box down here. OBS WebSockets is a functionality of OBS that is kind of baked in ever since a couple of major versions ago, so for a couple of years now, that allow you to use WebSockets, which is just a web interaction standard for like machine-to-machine communication, to pass commands and react to events from the OBS side. The module will work without OBS WebSockets, but only if you have the game source, so the game canvas, running in an OBS browser source, because it will instead use a little piece of API that OBS likes to inject into this browser source. But the functionality here is very limited, so OBS WebSockets is recommended in any situation where you can use it. You want to go to the settings right here, and what you can do in here is you can set these. These are saved to the client, so your browser. Saving these here will not really do much for actually interacting with them, but you have the ability to sync whatever you put in here to another client. This will work fine most of the time, but you will run the risk of this connection sort of severing when you are updating OBS, or anything else might cause OBS to lose the client-side storage for your Foundry instance. Like you switching computers, you would have to set this up again. A way to set this up permanently is to use the custom CSS feature of OBS. Please keep in mind that this is an unintended use case of the CSS feature, but it will not interfere with any style changes you make to the appearance of your Foundry installation. What you want to do is you want to open your OBS browser source right here, and then you, in the custom CSS section right here, the magic string, so to speak, which is this section right here. You can copy this out of the tutorial on the documentation page for OBS Utils. For the host, if you're doing this in the same OBS instance that you're wanting to remote control, you can just put localhost here. You do not need to put any host. The port and the password will be in the OBS WebSockets settings inside OBS. You can find those by going to Tools and then to WebSocket Server Settings. You will have a server port there, and you will have a server password that you can copy out and just paste in here. You do not need to have any specifics here. You can just put in the values as they are. You do not need to put quotes around them or anything. It's just important that it is this kind of text before, including the colon, and then it's followed up by a semicolon after the value for the port, which is typically 4455, and the password, which is like anything you want it to be or whatever OBS generated for you. I also advise you to never share this information with anyone. You should not make this public. While most of the time this isn't an issue, this could feasibly be used to take control of your streaming software. So keep this value hidden. All right, so once this is set, you want to go to this setting, turn it on, which will allow you to use the OBS WebSocket version of the main feature we're here to discuss today, the OBS Remote. The OBS Remote is this right here, and it contains two types of events. Any event that is prefixed with this lovely little D20 icon is an event that happens inside Foundry. And the one event we have here that is prefixed with the signal strength icon is an event that happens in OBS. The only OBS event currently supported is the stop streaming event. Whenever you stop streaming, you can have something occur in OBS. The remote supports 4 changes to your OBS configuration. You can switch a scene by just entering the scene name here. It needs to be the exact same name as it is in OBS. So if you have a scene named D&D pause, you need to make sure that it's spelled exactly the same, including punctuation and capitalization. You have toggle source, which needs a scene name and a source name. So something like display capture or game capture or whatever you named the source goes in here. And if the source is visible, this will turn it invisible. And if it is invisible, it will turn it visible. If you want to set the state instead of changing it, there's also enable source and disable source, which should be self-explanatory at this point. For the events, you stop streaming, as I said. This is mostly in here for something we've gone over in the base setup tutorial. This can be used to turn the chat source invisible when you stop streaming, so that when you set it up the next time, you don't need to make sure to have it set to invisible when you log in. If you don't understand what I mean by that, go and watch the base installation tutorial. Then you have the Foundry events. The load event is very simply when the application first loads. So when you refresh the page or when you first kind of get onto the page. Then we have a combat start and a combat end event, which are triggered, as the name suggests, whenever the combat starts or the combat ends. This is kind of intended for you to, when the combat starts, to go to a combat scene, and when the combat ends, to go back to a regular gameplay state scene. Then there's pause, which is what happens when you press spacebar and the game is paused. This event will trigger when the game is paused, and the unpause event likewise will trigger when the game is unpaused. The final one is scene load. So this event will trigger whenever you switch scenes. However, this one is special in configuration because you can specify the scene name. If you, for instance, have a scene that has a special stream layout for it, or you have separation between a narrative scene and combat maps, you can make this switch your OBS scene based on the name of your Foundry scene, or toggle on or off sources. But you need to keep in mind that if you want to utilize this, you should plan out what sequence of scene activations you have when you're playing, because there's currently no feature to switch back when you're leaving the scene. This is just for loading, not for unloading. So you want to plan out, I have this narrative scene, and then afterward I'm loading this battle map scene, and then from that point onward I don't need the narrative overlay anymore. You want to make that battle map that you know you're going to load the final trigger that will go back to your regular view. And then for the narrative scenes, for each of them, you can go to the narrative view. That kind of stuff. A bit abstract here. I don't really have a good example for this. But that's what this is intended for. When you load a scene of a specific name, then you can trigger a change in OBS. Also, to make at least this side a bit easier, you can just drag and drop a scene in here, and it will reference it. All right. That will be the OBS remote tutorial. This one has been a bit shorter than the others. Thank you for watching. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to look at the documentation online or come to the Discord.